So this morning I want to ask you to think of a person. Actually, I want to ask you to think of that person, the person who takes up space in your mind, who every time you think about that person, it actually generates some visceral reaction in you. Maybe it's something that they did, maybe it's something that they said, but it has affected you, it has injured you, or it has negatively impacted your life. And you still feel some lingering anger towards that person because you're maybe suffering a little bit, and maybe in your mind, you're thinking that person kind of got off scot-free. I need you guys in the back to switch to the next light thing, if we can. That would be really helpful to me. Maybe you've had conversations in your head of what you would really like to say to that person. Or maybe you have these dreams and these visions of your head, and you can watch this person, crashing and burning at some point in the future. Maybe you don't have anything to do with it, but you would just enjoy watching that happen. Or maybe you just spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to avoid that person for the rest of your life. Is there a person? And I realize you may not still be mad at that person, but if you saw that person in the grocery store, what would you do? Like, I wasn't really planning to get cereal, but the cereal aisle looks really good right now. Ever been there? Maybe you have a person and maybe you don't. And if we're honest, though, we've all had that person. And here's the hard truth of it this morning. Whoever that person is and whatever that person has done, he's overstayed his visit in your mind. And he needs to be shown the door, or it could be her too. Yep, it's time to say goodbye. It's time to be done with the churning. It's time to be done with the brooding. It's time to be done with the grudge that you're carrying around. Maybe it's time to be done with that silent plotting of how you're going to even the score, make sure that he pays, or make sure that they at least know how much that they have hurt you, and somehow get some leveling of the situation. But it's not easy to let go, is it? In fact, if I'm completely honest, I'm still a little miffed at one of the flight attendants that I dealt with a little over a week ago. We were on a flight back from India, which is a nice, short 15-hour and 15-minute flight. And we had gotten bumped, so we were like in the last seats on the plane. So I was sitting literally in the middle seat of the last aisle. So there's 4 seats on either side of me, and there I sat. And after about 6 hours, I got up, and as I got up, I realized I needed to tie my shoe. Well, I couldn't tie it in the seat in front of me because I couldn't even bend over. So I got to the aisle, and how do you tie your sheet in an airplane aisle? Tie your sheet. Tie your shoe, okay? If you got a sheet, you got another problem going on there in the airplane too. But anyhow, so I'm like, I don't, because you bend over, the plane kind of wobbles a little bit, and there's one of those little jump seats in the back that was folded down. So I just put my foot up like that and tied my shoe. Wrong thing to do, because the flight attendant was right behind me and gave me quite a lecture on the fact that she had to sit on that seat and that I was being thoughtless in tying my shoe there. And I was like, all I said was, I am so sorry. I didn't know what else to say. But I sat there. Well, at least it gave me something to do for the next 6 hours of my flight, though. I just sat there and thought, really, where did she expect me to tie my shoe? She comes down the aisle, do you want something to drink? No, I don't. Take that, right? But we get like that, don't we? Where something happens and we just get a little bit miffed and it just kind of lodges there. And then it's like, what I should have said was, ever done that one? Fortunately, I can never think of that thing in the moment, and I am so grateful. And I come up with them later on. But we do that. We hang on to offenses, or really we hang on to our anger, and that's not okay. We've been talking about the idea of anger, and we're coming back to that this morning, because we live in an angry world, and it sucks us in sometimes, and we become, victims is the right word, we become participants of the anger that we see in our world. And so what we've done this far is we've tried to, first of all, establish, hey, these are the reasons for our anger. In most cases, there's a trigger for our anger, and then there's a cause for anger, and they're not the same thing. This happens over here, and it makes us mad, but it's something that's going on in our life right here that's causing that anger. And we talked about the importance of going back to the cause, because that's where we start to fix our anger issues. We talked about Cain and Abel, and God actually said, why are you so angry, Cain, because you're angry at Abel, but you're really not. Your problem isn't with Abel. Your problem is with yourself here. And so we need to ask ourselves, why are we so angry? Secondly, we talked about defining the dangers of anger and the harm that anger can cause. Anger, by the way, is not sinful. It's what we do with our anger that can make it sinful. And anger must be handled with care. And most of us, we don't handle anger with care because we don't manage our emotions very well. But it's such a big issue to beware of the dangers of anger. And then we talked about anger management from the book of James, some simple rules of here's some things you can do when you're in that situation and you can feel it coming, like boom, like the attendant just chewed you out for trying your, okay, and you're like, you can feel it. What do you do in that moment? But these all have addressed the idea of anger in the moment. What about anger past the moment? Or anger that just like wants to stick around? Because just as bad as anger in the moment can be and dangerous as it can be even more dangerous if we carry it on into the future because of the incredible impact that it has. In the rage aspect of anger may dissipate, but when we hold on to it, the power of anger actually intensifies. And before we know it, it's eating away at us from the inside out. Before we know it, it's affecting our relationships, and we need to deal with it. Now, the solution, though, is not to just swallow it and say, well, I really shouldn't be angry. That's not really going to solve the problem. Or it's like, I'm just going to live with it. I'll just take another one for the team. Or I'm just going to suppress it. Or I'm just going to pretend like it's not there, that it was no big deal, and I'm just going to move on. But really we need to deal with it, because otherwise we end up with anger that sits inside us and it sees beneath the surface and it becomes something else. And it becomes, well, I think two different things and something or any number of things between these two things on the spectrum. But outwardly we see this expressed as revenge. This, the phrase, I don't get mad, I just get even. And we hear people say that and we laugh about it, but really it's not that funny. But it's a very popular alternative. We see this in society today, don't we? The revenge society. If something happens to you, you make sure that you get back at the other person. And we use the internet for this, or we use whatever medium we need to use this. But we see revenge and retribution and retaliation. We see it just everywhere, and it's used like without impunity. In fact, it's used like it's a virtue somehow. Like, watch me exact revenge here, or watch me go on my revenge tour, and it's like it's supposed to be admirable, or at least it's supposed to be justified. And it's used as a weapon in the arsenal, basically to get your own way, or to establish yourself, or to protect yourself. You choose, but we see revenge as this virtue in our society, and it's not. In fact, we're going to see God says something extremely different from that in a minute here. But if you're okay with this idea of revenge, which we're not, but we are, and I'll explain in a minute, we all need to lean in, because God's not okay with it. In fact, he calls revenge what? He calls it evil. But that's a pretty strong word. And it's dangerous. Revenge is dangerous because it eats at you. And even if you get revenge, have you noticed this? It's not that satisfying. Like, you finally got it, it's like, okay, I should feel a whole lot better than I do about that. But I just kind of feel kind of like, I just got dragged down to that level, and it really wasn't worth it anyhow. But most of us, our revenge isn't kind of like, I'm going to make this other person pay. We have our own different versions of revenge. Like, we kind of just hope that bad things happen to that person, or somebody takes care of the revenge for us. Like that guy who cut you off going about 90 on the freeway. Don't you just hope that you go around the corner and one of our state troopers has been waiting for him? And that's what it's like, what? I'm not going to do anything, but I sure hope something bad happens to that person, that he gets his. We hope the worst for him. A little karma is the word that we use sometimes, so that person gets exposed or that person gets embarrassed. Or sometimes we just kind of do it in our heads, like, whatever it is, I'm just going to live with it. But wouldn't it be great if, and we imagine all these different things, wouldn't it be great if he had a flat tire on the way to work today? And then he missed the big appointment, and he lost the big sale. That'd be awesome, wouldn't it? And we're not going to go slash his tire or anything, but we start to have those types of thoughts where we hope, actually, the best, or we imagine bad things happening to them. Or sometimes we just create friction, or we create hindrances to that person. And so we start stories, or we share a little gossip, or we are critical of that person, or we start to cast doubts, or sometimes we refuse to cooperate. See, there's a lot of different ways that we fall into this revenge category, where we say, like, I would never just, and a guy punches me, I'm not going to punch him back. And yet we have either the heart desire, or sometimes we have those little secret ways that we sometimes look for what I would call closet revenge, because we want them to pay for the hurt that they caused. No, that's not it. We want justice to be served. And that's why we desire revenge, is because we sense that there's been this imbalance of justice, and boy, you've been on the bad side of it, and there's something in us that's like, that's just not right, and I want it to be evened out. I want them to pay for what they did. But, probably not all of us are looking for revenge. We may slip into that territory every once in a while, but I think we often have a very different, yet in the same way, kind of eerie response. And that's what I would say is it's inwardly experienced as resentment. Outwardly, I'm going to get revenge. Inwardly, I just don't like you. Inwardly, I'm kind of like, I don't want to see you. I don't want to deal with you. And we get to that place where I don't like that person. And who are those people in our lives that we're kind of like, I just don't really care for that person. And a lot of times it's because of something that they have done to us. And so we resort to different things in that department too. Like sometimes it's avoidance. Like I'm just going to stay away from that person. Or else, sometimes I'm not going to stay away from them, but while they're here, I'm going to create separation. So I'm going to give them the silent treatment, or I'm just going to treat them coldly or with contempt. We see this a lot of times with even siblings who stop talking to each other. Like there's something that comes up and it's like, we don't resolve it. We just go our separate ways, and we go days and months and weeks and years, and we don't communicate. Sometimes we doghouse people. And everything that they do after that point, we're like, see, that just proves what I was saying there, even if it's innocent. But that's how we start to fall into this idea of resentment. It's like an emotional reaction. Every time we see that person, we feel it right here. And we refuse to let go. And this person is forever on the naughty list. And it's like, we're going to make them pay that way, which makes no sense, does it? So I'm going to sit over here and think bad thoughts about you, and you're going to somehow feel that vibe and go, oh, they don't approve. It's kind of a crazy thing, but we tell ourselves that sometimes because, who does it hurt? Well, the answer is it hurts us. So what we want to do is we want to find the best response to when people hurt us or harm us, because they do. I'm not dismissing that in the least, but how are we going to do that? See, resentment or revenge, neither is a good response, neither is going to help you, neither is going to solve the problem, and neither is going to actually satisfy your anger issue. And if we hang on to them, they're actually going to do more damage. They're going to start to shape us. And we've all met people like this who are just mad at the world. You're like, what's that person's problem? Well, there's anger, there's resentment that they just won't let go of, and it starts to color the way that they see the world, and it starts to change who they are. It can negatively impact our relationships. Do you know an angry person? You're probably not you're hoping they don't invite you to lunch, because you just get to sit and listen to all their things that they're angry about. But it negatively impacts our relationships. In the book of Proverbs, Solomon says, hey, don't just, when you see an angry man, get away from him. It's not even worth it. And when we deal with anger on the inside, that's what happens. Our perception is distorted. We see everything through angry eyes. It dries up our compassion. And we no longer care about the hurts of others because we're too busy keeping our own hurts alive. Or we look at other people and say, well, yeah, but you don't have as bad as I do. Yeah, you didn't have anybody do to you what I had done to me. And we get into those situations, but it leaves us stuck in the past. And we can't move forward because we're still nursing that anger in our lives. But it doesn't just stay with you. It doesn't just stay with me. As it do, it spreads. You ever met like an angry family? Like the parents are mad, the kids are mad, everybody in the family's mad. Like if you walked into their house, you just think that like everybody's just going to yell at each other because you run into them. Anger doesn't just stay here. It spreads out. So how do we deal? Well, I should say one more thing. When we don't deal with our resentment and our anger, it affects our relationship with God. There's that weird phrase in the Lord's Prayer where it says, forgive us as we forgive. And I don't know exactly how that works, but it's kind of frightening, isn't it? That God's waiting for us to forgive sometimes. But when we hang on to things, that maybe God's like, what do we got here? So we've all been wronged. We've all been on the receiving end of a justice that lingers. And if we don't deal with it, it's going to deal with us. So what do we do with this lingering anger, bitterness, resentment, the grudges we carry? Paul gives us some ideas in Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12, verse number 17 is where we're going to start reading. It's on the back of your outline too if you want to follow it along there. And Paul's speaking specifically to the issue of revenge here, but the principles that he outlines, I think, help us with the resentment issue too, which is where most of us live. The book of Romans was written by Paul. It's written to a church that he had never visited. And in fact, we don't think any of the other apostles had ever visited this church, so he kind of gotten started. And so it's a very heavily doctrine-oriented book. Paul's trying to teach them basically, here's what the gospel is, here's what it means to live in the gospel, live as part of his church. And so for 11 chapters, he just kind of gives them this really meaty treatise on here's what the Christian life looks like. And then in chapter 12, he switches and said, okay, here's all this truth. Here's how it plays out in life. And it plays out in life. First of all, you commit yourselves to Christ, but secondly, you commit yourselves to each other. In fact, in chapter 12, verse number 5, Paul says, so in Christ we, and we are the body of Christ, though many form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. And so he goes on here and he says, now, what I'm going to say next is here's how to have good relationships with each other. And he gets to verse number 17 and says, now, here's what you do when somebody does you dirty. When somebody wrongs you. So let's read this, verse number 17. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, do this. If you're hungry, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will put burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And in this passage, he gives us 5 instructions, specifically that deal with revenge. But I think it also deals with this idea of resentment as well. First of all is this one. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. The first thing that we take from that is what? What has happened to you was evil. And sometimes you're like, well, like you're minimizing this. You're just kind of blowing this off and acting like it was not a big thing. It was a big thing. It was actually evil, and we're allowed to say that. Sometimes the things that happen to you are horrible. I'm not denying that, and I am not minimizing that in any way, shape, or form. And I want to be completely clear about that. It may have been evil that happened to you. The second thing, though, is in the instruction itself, do not repay. Paul's saying what? You have a choice in how you can respond. I know what they did, but what are you going to do or not do? And we have that responsibility, but it's more than just responsibility. We are given the agency to still be in control of ourselves in this situation. We don't have to give the control over to the other person. So they did this to me, so I'm just going to automatically do this back. Then I am not in control here. But when I choose how I'm going to respond, then I'm actually in control in this situation. And so we have a choice to make, but the choice is to respond not to what was done to you, but to respond according to how you should respond or who you are supposed to be. And if we repay, that's a funny word there, or if we're retributive or retaliatory or vengeful, that is what Paul says here, speaking for God. That would be evil. Revenge is evil. And by responding in kind, that just multiplies the evil. We just got more evil here. We don't need more evil in the world. And adding darkness to darkness because we think that, if I can get this, if this person stoops to this level, we think somehow, and we don't think this, but we think this, we think that somehow, okay, if I go down here, the world's going to be a better place. It's easy to go there, isn't it? But the goal is not to level the score. The goal is to stop the cycle. So if a person harms you, it's like, okay, it stops right here. Not, well, then I'm going to get you back, or I'm going to take my frustration out on somebody else. We do that sometimes, don't we? And so it suggests then that we have to come up with a different plan. And I'm not telling you this is going to be easy, but this is what God's plan is. There are better alternatives. So what is that? Second thing, be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. And that phrase there, be careful, in the original language Greek, it means to think beforehand or to think through your response. So many times we respond emotionally in anger, and anger is an emotion. Fair enough. But the challenge here is like, okay, we need to get on the other side of that emotion. We need to get to where we're being rational. So we're actually responding and not reacting. Hard to do. But as we get that time and that separation, it gives us opportunity to do that. He also says, realize that you have an audience. That's interesting, isn't it? We always think it's between him and me. Well, it's between him and me and everybody else who is like surrounding the situation, who's going to be impacted. Some of them just by the negative events that take place. Some of it are going to be impacted by the way that you conduct yourself and just by their watching this. And so Paul says, realize that you have an audience. Your response is going to have an impact on others. You can win them over, you can turn them off. And what do you need to do, though? You need to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. It's not that they're deciding what's right, it's that you are going to do what's right and people are going to see. Because that's how it works. And then he says something, and here's the hardest part, I think. Do your part to bring about peace. The goal is not vindication, to prove that you were right. The goal is not to even the score. The goal is not even to get some type of concession or to get in the last word. The goal is peace. And the goal of peace, and peace is not just saying, okay, well, I'm just going to forget about it. No, the goal of peace is to work through this situation until we get where both parties are in the right place. If we just say, well, like, I'm just going to give up on it, whatever, that can be false peace. We want real peace, true peace. The goal is peace. And so you need to do, I need to do, we need to do what we can in this situation. If we have any responsibility in the situation, we got to own it. And I don't like that. I don't enjoy that. I don't think any of us does. But if we'll own it, then we can start to get to this peace thing. And instead of having this grudge, we can start to just deal with the situation. And that may be the simplest and yet the most difficult thing in this whole idea here of dealing with our anger is saying, okay, here's what happened. I'm just going to step into the chaos. I'm going to deal with this disruption, as unpleasant as it is, and we're going to get this resolved. Because if we don't, it turns into resentment. It turns into revenge. So we've got to do our part to bring about peace. And that means that you may have to address things. You may have to have the hard conversation. And it's only as far as you can go. You can't control the other person's response to it. but what can you do about this situation? That's hard. I get it, but this is what Paul's saying here. And then he goes on and says this, and this I think is not easier, but maybe like more encouraging. Give God space to work. Give God space to work. God is a God of justice, and God is a God who promises us and assures us at the end of the story, it's all going to be made right. It's all going to be evened out. Good is going to triumph. Right is going to be what wins. And he will make sure that it happens. But he's just like a lot slower about dealing with it than I am. And so I just want to kind of like, let me take care of that one for you, God. And so we get into our vengeful things. And we like it's like we take the gavel out of God's hands. There's an interesting couple verses in Proverbs 24. He says, do not gloat when your enemy falls. When they stumble, do not let your heart rejoice, or the Lord will see and disapprove and turn his wrath away from them. And that's the writer of Proverbs saying there, hey, like, don't even enjoy it when the person that you're feeling bad about, when they mess up, because God might see that and say, okay, I'm just going to let that one go. I want God's justice more than my justice. First of all, he's going to be wiser about it than I am. And secondly, he's going to be more effective with it than I am. And so what we're saying here is sometimes you just have to get to the place where you say, okay, God, I was injured, and we're not arguing that. I have done what I can. We're not arguing that. I'm giving this one to you. And you will have to sort this one out. You will have to make this one right. You will have to exact whatever, vengeance needs to be exacted. And he knows how to handle the situation or the person. So let's just give him control and let him settle the scores. Let's hand it off and move on. And boy, that's really hard to do, isn't it? And that's when that person starts to take up space inside my heart again. I say, okay, God, this one's yours. I'm going to let you have it. And, please deal with it or please deal with me. But bitterness sets in when we refuse to let go. And resentment sets in when we hang on to things that aren't really supposed to be ours. And then Paul finishes it up with this, because if he hasn't said enough hard things already, let's give you one more. Overcome evil with good. And it's more than Paul's just saying, hey, don't respond in kind. Paul's saying, however ornery, difficult, unthoughtful, unkind, mean they were, you need to be the opposite in kindness and generosity, in grace. Like, I'm okay with just letting it go and walking away, but now you want me to do something good? That's God's plan. So we choose to offer good when evil is deserved. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound kind of like Jesus? Who on a cross, instead of looking for revenge, said what? Father, forgive them. And actually, after that cross, I'm sure that there were people who went to that crucifixion that day who screamed, crucified him, that months later were standing in Jerusalem when Pentecost broke out and said, oh, that was the Messiah? And Jesus said, yes, come be part of this family. And so we choose to offer good when evil is deserved, and that makes us a whole lot more like God. And a whole lot more like Jesus. But in doing so, we overcome. Did you catch that? I want to fix the situation. I want to fix the person who was rude to me. I want to get that person who's always saying mean things to me. I want to get that taken care of. And God says, okay, here's the answer. You can overcome evil. Not just address it. You can actually win the day with good. Wow. And so we are asked to become people of blessing, people of forgiveness, people of grace. I'll talk a little bit more about this next week. When we came back from India, we missed our flight out of Delhi by like 5 minutes. And the next flight didn't leave for 24 hours. And so I'm stuck in this airport, and they have a weird rule there. If you come in the airport, you don't leave unless you leave on a plane. And so we could go nowhere. And so for 24 hours, I had 2 bags with me. We hadn't checked luggage. We couldn't even get that far. That I went everywhere with me in the airport. And I was tired and I was bored, but I'm like, at least I'm going to get some exercise. In the concourse there, I measured it on my phone. It was 3/4 of a mile one direction. And so I walked back and forth. But you know what I did? I walked with that luggage. But then I was like, this is stupid. There's 2 other people traveling with me or sitting right here. They're not walking. Let me just put my luggage right there. And so I let there, and I walked through. This is what God's asking us to do. Leave the luggage with him. Leave the insult with him. Leave the lie that was told about you with him. Leave the person that was rude to you with him. Leave that with him and walk free. He can and will right the situation in the way that is best. He can and he will bring healing to you when you pursue his plan. This passage does not suggest that the injury that you have received is not a big deal, and I'm not saying that either. And there are those of you who are sitting in that room, the evil that has been done to you is unimaginable. I'm not negating that. I am saying this, that we have a God who knows, and we have a God who's just, and we have a God who offers freedom to you. And for that person who's been living rent-free in your head and in your heart, it's long enough. It's time for an eviction. So make the choice to be in charge, to take responsibility, to do what's right, to pursue peace, to leave it to God. And then do that ridiculous thing that Paul suggests and offer good. Because that's what Jesus did. And he never asks us to do more than what he's done himself. Let's pray. God, you know the hurts that people in this room have experienced, and they're legitimate and real. And I pray right now that you would just start to bring some healing. We sang about that, not living in the shame and not living in the hurt. I pray that you would, though, give them hope that they can be done with it, that they can move on in whatever the best way is. And I pray that you would give some peace, and I pray that you would give peace in some relationships. And maybe, God, I pray that even some people be sitting here this morning would make that decision that they're going to pursue peace because there's a relationship that's not right, that needs to get fixed, and they can do something about it. I pray that you give them that courage to do it. But God, I pray that the revenge, that desire, I pray that you take that away from us. That resentment, I pray that you'd free us from that. Through your Spirit, through your Son, through your Word. So our heads are bowed, our eyes are closed. What decision choice do you need to make today? Will you commit to that? And then maybe this morning you haven't really experienced the goodness of Jesus Christ, who even though you sinned against him, he went to a cross and died for you. He gave you good for evil. And he's done that for all of us. And it's a gift that he offers that you can accept this morning. To simply say, Jesus, I accept you, the good that you've given in your cross, in your resurrection. I want to follow you with my life. If you have questions about that, I'd love to talk to you about that. You can stop me anytime on the way out. But what will be your decision? What is the decision that you need to make? God, don't let us come to church and be confronted with your word without being changed by your Spirit, I pray. Amen.